are traveling. We have some students coming in at 4 in the morning from China.
All right.
I know.
It's devotion. I like that.
I love it. Yes. And Lynn are traveling. We have some students coming in at 4 in the morning from China.
All right.
That's your fight, Josh.
Oh.
It's all primed. I'm getting the link to send it out.
Oh, nice. So I'm sorry, who'd you say was here?
Oh, Lynn, let me see. Lynn is actually in the States. Oh, and Lauren's coming. Lynn, I don't know. Lynn, are you able to be on screen? You don't have to be. No worries.
I'm well dressed, so
I understand. It's 2020. Hi, Lauren. Hello. I'm going to tell. So Lauren, Josh Rosenblatt is here.
okay. Hi.
Hi, Lauren.
Right. And I'm just going to tweet out this link because Josh, you have lots of fans. When I know you're not on social media anymore, but people still pay attention.
Do they?
I got.
That's nice.
You know who was one of the first? Esther Lynn, who
What did Esther say?
immediately liked it. So.
Oh, good.
Esther, I adore you. Okay, so let me just tweet this out. And I was telling you, Lynn, who is there, she's actually in the US, but her family's all in China. So she is spending her Thanksgiving on her own in her bed, she says. So that is such a 2020 story.
It really is, yeah.
That was one. But you know, sometimes we're all kind of taking a rest, right? And here, I'll do watch live. And I am so thankful that you are here.
I mean, let's be honest, going home for Thanksgiving is completely exhausting.
Oh, no. Is that what you usually did?
No, it's because it's completely exhausting. I always stay here.
This is your norm. We're all being Rosenblatts this year.
It really is. I really do feel like the world has adapted to my way of living. It's true. Not getting too close to strangers, lots and lots of time to yourself, staying in your pajamas and staying at home.
Yeah. So Lynn actually wrote on the comments here. Professor Kidder gave us a lot of discussion questions about why we fight. I wonder whether Mr. Josh can get 100 points for all the questions. Oh, that's great, Lynn. Yeah,
that's a very good question.
I might see if you remember your own book because it was published now almost 2 years.
That's
ago,
true.
Right?
That's true.
That'll be 2 in January.
How many questions were there?
Oh, I've given you that list. Lauren, were there a lot of questions?
Yeah, there was a lot in like the early chapters. There's probably like 5 or 6 per chapter, but then as it got more towards the end, I think the questions were shorter, but they were more involved.
Yes, I wanted to kind of poke into more of the maneuvers that Josh was doing and his rhetorical method.
So the question isn't, the important question isn't whether I could get 100%, is did anyone in the class get 100%?
I'm telling you right now, everyone on the screen, you guys got 100. Or no.
Just passing out hundreds over here.
To get them to like me more.
And me.
But no, they did very well. And we're going to go through some of those questions, particularly ones because we're discussing the end of the book. And what came up, I teach a class on Mondays and Thursdays. And what came about, what we really learned, hello, everyone, is that how much we brought COVID into the conversation.
Sure.
I think 2020 has been chock full of conflict and fighting. And what we kind of took from the text, Josh, as we go into this more, and I'll fully introduce you, of course, is that it's not just about fighting in a cage. It's about the human fighting, the human conflict, which can be, yes, physical, but also mental, psychological, political. And so I love it that we get to bring you in on the conversation now. 2 years from when you published it, how many years since when you actually researched it, and we're in
pretty much exactly 4 years out from the fight, I think. Yeah, it was mid-December.
Oh my
I
gosh.
remember it was yeah, it was mid-December. It was 2 weeks after Trump was elected. So here we are 4 years later.
We are 4 years later. And
In a
what a day.
slightly better headspace.
Yes. Oh, thank God. Yes. Well, I will allow you guys to introduce yourselves. I'm going to also, if hope you don't mind, we're recording this class because again, Rosenblatt has some fans out there that really want to see him. So I hope that's okay. But Josh, writer and author of Why We Fight, which we're going to do a deep dive into. Not only should we do a close read, I think, but no, we're going to also get into your themes that you bring up and topics. This 2019, yes, it's a biography of Josh's experience becoming an amateur MMA fighter, but it's also a physical and philosophical mediation on why humans are drawn to fighting. Some more background on Josh, a graduate of Wesleyan University. His work has appeared in Vice, Texas Observer, the Austin Chronicle, and the Washington Post. And between 2012 and 2014, he was the editor-in-chief of Fightland, Vice's media's mixed martial arts publication. And I'm telling you, I know that more than one student has used Fightland for a lot of their historical texts.
Oh yeah?
Yeah. So I'm glad it's out there.
Great. Yeah, it's awesome.
I know. So thank you for joining us. And I must also say, Josh has been a big part of my class since you came to my class in fall of 2019 in person.
Yeah.
For those days.
Was it just the fall of 2019?
Yes.
Wow.
2019.
This year has just been
I know.
infinite. Yeah.
He visited AU. You guys came to Chef Jeff's for an after kind of symposium with my students. We talked about Fight Club.
We did, yeah.
Yes. I haven't been able, with the virtual, I haven't been able to spend as much time on the cinema of fighting. So I gotta remember to do that more. Anyway,
have you seen that there's 2 new
yes
MMA movies coming out in the next couple of weeks?
I saw,
and they look exactly the same, and they look exactly the same as every movie about MMA that has ever come out ever.
I would love to talk about it because I watched one of them this weekend.
They're already out?
Well, you know, I don't want to get off topic too much, but now 2020, it's usually on demand.
I guess that's true. Yeah, I wasn't even sure if they'd been released on demand yet.
Yeah.
Did you watch the one with
Steven Dorff?
Steven Dorff.
He is playing Conor McGregor. It's not even a subtle nod. He's wearing like the suits. He's got the fur coat and scenes, the robe. So
he gives us hope. Steven Dorff. Steven Dorff's got to be 45 years old, and he's plays the best MMA fighter in the world.
What I have to say, and I want to talk about, hi Maggie, is what I want is that I don't want to give away too much because I think it's in the trailer, but the end fight is the father against the son.
Yeah.
So can we have an MMA movie that doesn't involve family members, please?
No, you can't have an MMA movie that doesn't involve family members. It has to involve a white man who is fighting to redeem himself and or save a family home. Or
teacher.
What's that?
A teacher professor.
There's often a teacher, but they're secretly having fights on the side.
Yeah.
But yeah, troubled relationship with a father. Yeah.
I think between the two of us, we have a film there. I'm the professor, and then you're the white male who's.
I'll just be the white guy.
Well, yeah. We'll draft this out later. Anyway, sorry about this, guys. And I don't know if anyone wants. I've introduced Josh, but we could go around the room real quick. I know some of you guys, it's the middle of the night and you don't want to show your faces, and Professor Kidder's learned that through this. But if anyone wants to say hello, Lauren, I see you there. Can you just tell where you're from?
Yeah, so I'm from the Chicago suburbs. I'm in DC right now, though.
Got it. Are you going back for after break or?
No, I'm actually gonna be here pretty much until school's done. We're not allowed to go home for Thanksgiving or Christmas.
Yeah. I know you're not. Oh, and you're on the basketball team.
Yeah.
That probably also plays into that. Yeah. It's a different year. It's different with everyone. Hi, Alex.
I'm mute.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
So we have Josh Rosenblatt here, the writer.
Oh,
How's it
I
going?
do. Yeah.
And
Good,
Alex, can you say where you're from and your connection to AU?
Oh, yeah. So I'm from Chengdu, China. It's a city in southwest China, I think. Yeah. Connection to AU. I'm a senior majoring in physics at AU. Yeah, and basically it's my last semester here. The semester before I graduate. So yeah.
Right.
You're graduating at the end of this term or spring?
Spring. Yeah.
Spring. Wow. What a year to graduate.
Exactly.
It's been different. And Alex, Josh, I actually already told you about Alex because one of your lines inspired, I would call it a fictional short story for your first assignment. And do you remember the line, Alex?
Oh yeah, let me grab the book.
He's got the book. But it was all about bloodlust.
Yes, I think it's on.
Trying to remember.
Yeah, it's on page 17.
Yeah, you want to read it?
Top of the page. Yeah, but yeah. So it's Krav Maga introduced me to the bloodlust and animal aggression, which, as a law-abiding member of civilized society, a loyal son of pacifist father and lifelong. But the first, the first few sentences inspired me pretty much.
Yeah. So just the bloodlust and the animal aggression led to this really interesting story. And Alex, if you could pitch in, it was imagining a post world in MMA where there's certain levels to the octagon. There are fighters, and then there are the monsters that they control with certain headgear. And it's the monsters who fight. It was really cool. But you thought about bloodlust and animals, and what would be the next? What is the next MMA? If we wanted to think about it. So, see, look what creativity.
That's very cool.
Yeah, you're right. All right, and Maggie, hello.
Hi.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm great. I'm good to see you. So we're here with Josh Rosenblatt. Can you tell me where you're coming in?
I'm sorry, yeah, what?
Oh, where are you coming in from?
Hello.
Now?
Oh, so I'm from New Jersey. I'm a sophomore at AU. Getting through it.
Are you here in DC or have you gone back to New Jersey?
No, I'm actually in California right now.
That is one thing with 2020. You can be anywhere. You're in California.
Yeah, it really could be anywhere.
Say she's got the doors and the windows open. That must be nice.
No. Where in California?
No, yeah, it's so nice. San Diego.
Oh my God.
Vista. San Diego, yeah. Very exciting. We have kids here, so
wow,
it was just like very, very fun.
Yeah. No, and Josh is actually coming from. You were in Brooklyn, and now you're coming in from where in New Jersey?
I'm actually in Brooklyn right now.
Oh, you're in Brooklyn.
Yeah, we
can't anybody.
I know we came in for a couple of days. So I'm in my friend's tiny little pied-à-terre apartment in Brooklyn.
Got it. Wow. Well, thank you again. Does anyone else want to introduce themselves? I know some of you aren't having your camera on, so I don't want to, if you're still in your PJs or anything. Oh, there's Lynn.
Hi.
Lynn, can you introduce yourself?
So I'm Ling and from China now. I live in Washington, D.C. because the plan go back to China is so costly, maybe to 100,000 for just one way ticket.
What?
Yes.
Wow.
Oh,
Is there-
not in dollars, but in Chinese current.
Oh, okay.
currency. Yeah.
But still, is that because there's so few tickets?
Yeah, right. Maybe just one plan for every week. Yeah.
Wow. Well, I'm happy you're here in DC, even if we can't be in person. And I was saying that Lynn's can be by herself for Thanksgiving, but you know, you can always reach out to Professor Kidder if you want to say hi or anything, because we're all kind of dealing with a different Thanksgiving. But this brings me back to Josh, because Josh kind of liked not having to be with family at Thanksgiving anyway. So we're now entering his world. So Josh, we kind of initially talked about, I do want to show my students your fight, and I'm going to embarrass you by showing that as well. I get
That's nothing could be less embarrassing to me.
highs for that.
It's the high point of my life. Are you kidding?
But you were talking about actually, I'd love to know this, the process of writing it, and that it would be 2 years to around this time or to the day, I can't remember, that you got the publishing deal.
No, I got the publishing deal in January of 2016,
Wow.
and then fought the fight in December of 2016, and then turned the book in March of 2017. The real wait is waiting for the book to be published. I think it was 2 years after I
Yeah.
was done writing it that it finally came out.
Is that based on their scheduling? They want certain books to hit the market at certain
I
times?
guess so. Yeah, they didn't really. They didn't tell me why. They just said, "Here's the date," and I was so excited that it was coming out at all. I didn't ask any questions.
Got it. And there really wasn't, your editor didn't do a great deal of editing either.
She did. She contributed a whole lot. She was fantastic. What she did that was great was that she did a whole lot, but in service of my voice. She didn't try to make it someone else's voice. She didn't. The corrections that she made or the edits that she made were designed to amplify what I had done, as opposed to trying to change what I had done, which was lovely. And it wasn't sure. I didn't know. I mean, I knew I liked her. I knew her and I liked her, but we had never worked together before. So when those first round of edits came back, I was terrified that it was just going to be, cut this entire part out, and no, this has got to go, and you got to rewrite all this. It wasn't like that at all. It was very much in service of what I had done. What she did that was really a brilliant thing, which I claim credit for now. But what she did is she was the one who put at the top of every chapter, 11 months out, 9 months out, 6 months out. She really wanted it. She wanted it because, as you know, the book sort of, I like being discursive and having things go off in 1,000 different directions. She really felt like as long as there was always that sense of the impending doom of the fight, and you kept reminding readers, this is coming, this is coming, this is coming, there would always be that sort of energy to it. And she was absolutely right. And several people have told me that they like the structure of the book and they like that thing. And I always say, well, that was totally my idea, of course.
I know. I think it was one of the first things I said to you when we talked on the phone.
And I'm sure I totally claimed credit for it. Yeah.
No, it's fascinating to learn, because both of you and I have talked about when we've had things published in other, certain like magazines or publications, newspapers, a lot of editing goes into where it almost is a different creature at the end. So it's nice to know that oftentimes, especially a book, which seems more of a personal, venture, that's not going to happen.
It was, again, like I was worried. I mean, not scared, but I was tense. I just didn't know. And you're right. The idea of putting that much of yourself into something for that long and putting your name on it and having the whole, and then having it not be your words and your voice and your ideas, it would have been awful. But she's a great editor for that reason. It's a really great editor who makes you a better version of yourself.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Okay, folks, who has seen Josh's fight? If you did not, anyone look it up? Not well, we're going to look at it now. And I even had my students teach me how to slow-mo the end. So we'll see how well that goes. I will put this on. Okay, I wonder where I should start. Actually, I might kind of have you talk us through it, Josh. Look at how many views you have. Especially, let's just start here. Because I love this, and students chime in. I might even ask my students, what fear did Josh bring up, that, because he had talked about the fear of going in and having the fight or flight, what will happen, his first fight. He had talked about other things. What fear did this bring up? Being on the cage. Lauren, do you have an idea?
Yeah, I remember I literally just did these questions, so I'm trying to pull up what I said. But I think it was something like his that his grappling skills were too limited and that his opponent's strength was too great.
Yes, that was it. And what I also love, Josh, can I answer the question? He realized that he didn't want that one of his biggest fears was a boring fight. And Josh, it's so funny because can you talk us through, like, because I love rereading that part. And all of you guys maybe out there listening, a boring fight, we've seen them where it's just stagnant and nobody does anything. I was there for when DC fought Anderson Silva. The crowd booed because it was just DC lying on him.
Yeah.
So in that moment, what are you thinking?
Well, it's sort of like a three-pronged fear. Like, there was the fear just in general of, after all that time spent training and worrying and dying inside, that it was just because you see that he's just holding me against the cage. And like Lauren said, he was much stronger than I was, and he was a really good wrestler, and I couldn't get away. And there was a very real fear that this thing that I was hoping would be like a really important and significant experience in my life would be nothing of the sort. It would just be 9 minutes of pure boredom while he held me against the cage and I managed to stay on my feet, which would have been awful. It wouldn't have felt like an experience at all. The other concern was that I knew I had a book to write, and I didn't know how in the world I was going to write. If it had been 9 minutes of this and he just held me against the cage, I feel like I'm a pretty decent writer. I don't know if I could make that interesting for people. Like, you get 180 pages of buildup to a fight, and then you have a description of a fight, which is essentially just two men holding on to each other against the cage, and then nothing happens, and then they give him the decision victory. I wouldn't know how to turn that into something compelling. And then the third thing was, I had everyone in my life, friends and family, was either at the fight or was watching the fight online, and none of them care about MMA or know anything about MMA. It's just not their thing. So the idea that they had invested so much energy and concern and physical effort to watch me do this thing, if they would have been like, what, that's all this whole thing was? Like, just watching you lean against a cage for 9 minutes? It doesn't make any sense at all. It would have been completely disappointing for everyone involved. So yeah, I mean, that fear came through my head because I had enough time where nothing was happening. I actually had that fear of this. Is this it? What is that Peggy Lee song? Is this all there is?
Is this all there is?
Yeah.
I want to talk about that, and I'm actually going to let this roll, and then we'll discuss the rest of it, because I think you also hit on the nail. As one of my students said, they forgot after reading your book that this was two guys in a cage, because the fact that you're actually able to, articulate these ideas. And I'm just curious, does Conor McGregor have a three-pronged ideas of fears going on in his brain?
Well, no, I have the luxury of doing that because I'm not very good at fighting. Like, it's not like, in order to be really great, I think I talk about this a little bit in the book. I think that the perspective, having a sense of perspective, is probably death to a fighter, or death to a athlete, or death, like a really top-notch person at anything. I think having any sort of outside perspective in the moment that the thing is happening it's just death. So no, I would imagine that someone as good as Conor McGregor it's a meditative thing. They're completely focused on what's going on and completely immersed in that. I think thinking about it too much will get you really, really harmed. For me, not only by disposition, but also I had to make sure I was paying attention even when it was happening, because I wanted to have the experience, but I also knew that I had to write about it later. So I had to sort of be as much as I possibly could between being, moments of being punched in the face. I had to store away some memories and some information and some ideas just so I would have something to write about. So it was, I was putting myself in a perilous situation, but I volunteered for it. So
I love it. No, and also I'm realizing, just for people who haven't read your book, and I'm sorry for the spoiler, so maybe turn off this video and go read Why We Fight and then come back. But now, so I gave the spoiler alert. This is the fight that you're leading up to. You decide you're going to take an amateur fight at 40. Yes, that old age of 40. And you train and you take us through it, but you're also you're exploring the history of fighting, how it is represented in literature, in biology, and all these things. So as we move through your narrative, we're also contemplating the human aspect of it. So we meet your opponent, John Potts. I should give him a shout out here.
sure.
The poet, who is, did you have a name? Were you the writer? Or
No, I don't have I didn't give myself a writing nickname. And besides, he got the best one. So especially after I found out he was called the poet, I was like, I'm not going to bother with anything.
don't even go there. Yeah. And so then you guys, this was at 185?
170.
I forget you went down to welterweight. Oh my Lord. Well, we do. Well, how do I forget? We have your whole chapter on the weight
Yeah,
cut.
it's 4 years and many, many pounds away.
Away. Yes. Yes. So let's put through. I might fast forward a little bit. But this, you guys got to read it. Now you get to. Oh, darn it.
Break the legs out, go! Score! Keep scoring! You're fast! That's it! We're two!
I will go and we'll watch that in slow-mo.
So you learned how to do slow-mo.
I did.
Wow.
If I can do it. Yes, here we go. Do you know how to do slow-mo?
No, I just realized I've been wasting my last 4 years watching this in regular speed.
So is this your first time watching it in slow motion?
Yeah.
All right. Because it's a beauty. And you can do, we'll do our play-by-play here. I'm trying to think.
Score! Keep scoring! You're fast!
And excellent. So 1, 2, 1, 2. Can you name, who was that? Who was
That was the other guy's coach. That was him calling out for that.
Oh my gosh, I've watched this so many times. I thought that was yours.
No.
But let's just go back again. And you brought us into Dorius and the jab. Can you call it? You do a left jab?
Yeah, I did the old double jab. That's the first time I really got him, I think. That jab. And then right here I do a double jab. 1, 2, and then overhand right.
And you can see that he went to that side because of your double jab.
Yeah, scared him over to his left. Yeah.
And just one more time, because I have to say, what an ending.
Score! Keep scoring! You're fast!
Yeah, so that definitely, along with your big right hook, that's a hook, right?
It's like an overhand right, yeah.
Overhand right. and his dodging your other thing. I mean, beautiful. Did you know then?
No, I didn't know what the hell was going on. You'll see I put my hands up thinking that the fight, I was shocked by everything.
Oh, it's weird.
It's
Just
very dramatic in slow motion.
I know, isn't it dramatic? So then I'm curious, when did they know? Oh, they edited that part out. But this is when you're having, because we talked about this, and and we'll talk about it here now, is your, what is it? It's called your self-transcendent experience, right? Is this it when you?
No, if you go back right after the knockout,
Can we?
you go back a little bit and press play from there.
Poor John, we're getting, poor guy's got.
If you look right here, you can see me exhale. Look at me exhale right here.
Yeah, and I see you smile.
Let it play.
Yeah.
That's it right there. That was the moment.
That's it. That's so self-transcendent. I had you guys talk about that. You attribute it to the feeling of communal experience where I becomes we, and something that people feel in battle, and astronauts have the feeling when they look at the globe. Can you explain that?
Yes, my experience was clearly as significant as an astronaut staring down at the Earth from the moon. But yeah, I mean, I did a little reading about these transcendent experiences and I wanted to figure out what that thing I was feeling was, because it really did feel like, I mean, the best way I could describe it is all the sort of voices shut off, right? All the anxieties and all the self-awareness and all the insecurities and all the voices in your head that are telling you do this, don't do that. It all shut off and it all went quiet. And it felt like, after 40 years, it felt like relief, which I think is why I sort of breathed like I did. And it really did feel like, for those 5 or 10 minutes after the fight was over, that I felt completely connected to the world around me. And yeah, there's actually studies out there about the human brain during what they call the self-transcendent experiences.
Mm-hmm.
Some people get them through meditation. Some people get them through, extreme situations like fights or in war, or sort of taking in the natural world. And is that your brain is actually altered, and the barrier between the part of your brain that recognizes that you are a self separated from other people, or perhaps you might argue that gives you the delusion that you're a self separated from other people, that actually is depleted in those moments. And that's why the sense of like being connected to other people is not just a sort of spiritual notion, it's actually neurological. And I felt that 110%. And when I wax philosophical or poetical in the book about feeling connected to the referee and feeling connected to the ring girls and the judges and everyone, and to John especially, it was totally true. I mean, it's just, I wanted to hug everybody. I mean, it's just, and it's not because I won. I mean, winning was never really my concern. It was just that overwhelming an experience. I mean, it's just, I had never, and probably will never get anywhere near that again.
I'm curious if that's something that's only in combat sports.
I would imagine that you can get there all sorts of different ways. Again, like this scientist that I talked to said that when they had done these studies, they would look at people who were very trained at meditation. They could get themselves into that kind of space, because I know it's a big thing in mindfulness traditions and in certain spiritual traditions, that it really is about, that meditation is about wiping away the ego. I know that's a concept in Buddhism that's very strong, that you're essentially tying into the idea that your ego is meaningless and really just an illusion. This is just scientists confirming something that religious people have known for thousands of years, I guess. But I think that I think that a combat sports situation is a shortcut, because I know that I've tried to meditate, and I've tried to do the meditation, the mindfulness thing, and I've taken many, many walks in nature. And this was a very, very quick way to get to someplace I'd never gotten before.
Yeah. I really love the idea that you can have a religious epiphany, you can lose your ego, by punching someone out. It's just,
Anything, I mean, it really is, it's all, for me, all things are equal, right? It just, there's a great Frank Sinatra quote where he says, I'm for anything that gets you through the night. And I think it's kind of true in the other way, that you can't really judge how someone might get to an experience like that, short of if you're, I was about to say, short of if you're harming someone. This is a ridiculous thing to say when I've clearly just harmed someone. But I don't, there are probably 1,000,001 ways to get to that sense of transcendence, and to get a sense of that disconnection from the ego. I'm sure painters get there when they're in that particular mindset. I know I've had moments when I'm writing, when I'm really, really focused, where it kind of gets somewhere close to there, but like a really well-written sentence can kind of juice you up in the same way. Again, I think that fighting is just, there's so much fear involved, and it's so physical, and it's so focused that it's a great shortcut. And I can totally see why it's hard for fighters to quit. I mean, you're seeing it now with Shogun Rua, you're seeing it with Anderson Silva, and these guys are in their 40s and they should have quit a long time ago, and they're still saying, I want to keep doing this. And it might be the fame, it might be the money. I think my suspicion is it's a lot of that. It's how do you give up on that feeling, knowing that there's no other way probably that you're going to find that feeling, unless you devote yourself as much as you devote yourself to fighting. So I know it was something that I had to recover from. I mean, it took me a long time after the fight was over because I went very, very, very high, and then I crashed down very, very, very low. And it took a long time to get back to equilibrium, because I wanted to be back at that high. And unfortunately, there's a lot of dangerous ways to get to that high. So you sort of have to, it's not uncommon for fighters to end up doing drugs too. So, I mean, it makes sense.
I can see it. I can see, especially, well, the other thing too, speaking of glorious John Potts, I don't know if we should maybe, let's end on a scene where you guys are both, and I'm sure you may not, you do this, right? The shake hands. That's oh, look at the light. That's very transcendent.
There you go. It's a very spiritual handshake.
Yes. Well, we talk about the highs, and then, I know, Lauren, you've a lot of you guys have done athletics and team. If you guys want to talk about your experience with
That's true, Lauren. Do you feel like you get something that's similar from basketball?
I feel like that's a hard question for me to answer right now, just because I really haven't been in like that team atmosphere while we're like playing a game and stuff like that. I haven't been in that atmosphere for probably 7 going on 8 months now, since we like had our last game. And I honestly can't think of any experience similar to what you're describing as I've had before. So, I mean, I'm sure people do, but I don't know if I have necessarily.
Gotcha. I know what you mean, though. I haven't sparred with anyone since March 12th, which is when New York went into lockdown. And I mean, even that, sparring is nothing compared to fighting in terms of a transcendent experience. But sparring was my one thing in my life that always could get me somewhere approximating a different kind of experience, a fullness of experience. And these last 8-9 months, I think that's the thing that I've missed most, far and away, is the sparring, because that was everything else in my life it's very nice, it's very pleasant, but it's not that thing where you feel like you're risking something all the time and you feel like you're walking on a knife's edge. I miss that a lot. Yeah. So that, we were talking earlier, Nancy, that's the one thing about, I was joking that the lockdown has been kind of pleasant in some ways for me, but in that way it's been really, really bad, because it takes away the thing I kind of love the most.
Yes. No, I think we're all going through that. And thank you for sharing. And Maggie, Alex, anyone, please, this is your time also to ask questions as you've been reading this book. But I thought about John, because the other thing is that you had this self-transcendent experience high, which all of us get when, in some sort of achievement like that. John, there has to be a loser. And that's also done in front of his family and friends. And it makes you think that, every fighter goes into the ring with one or two options, you can have the highest high, or it can be, I would think, a pretty big low.
I would imagine, yeah.
I think especially I think of Holloway, Tony Holloway, after he lost to Poirier, and seeing his son cry, and seeing, because you're losing, this respect of being something, and now you've lost, what that feels like.
Right.
So almost being a fighter, you're going between these two elements of like the best feeling and then the other feeling.
Yeah, it's probably not healthy, but it's totally understandable. I mean, when you have two choices, when you have extreme elation or extreme mortification,
Yeah.
you're the kind of person who enjoys extreme experiences.
Yeah.
And the same way, I mean, it's the same way with people who get addicted to drugs or get addicted to gambling or whatever. You're just addicted to the possibilities. And what you can't deal with is, a true addict, what they can't tolerate, what they can't get on with is day-to-day average experiences.
Yeah.
When things are just fine, that's what kills them. And though I don't think I am that way, doing that one fight definitely got me in touch with that part of myself. But the way you had brought up how I was so worried about the fight being just the two of us lying against the cage like that, knowing that I was going to write a book about it and knowing that I wanted an experience out of it, I think I would have been okay if he had beaten me. If he had beaten me up and he had knocked me out cold, I think I would have been okay, because it would have been something. It would have been something to experience, and it would have been something to write about.
Yeah.
Again, trying to convert, it's the same way. I mean, trying to convert day-to-day boring experiences into literature is really, really hard. Trying to convert, I just got knocked out in front of 800 people, that's a little easier. Like that you can write okay. So I'm sure I would have been embarrassed. I'm sure it would have been hard. I'm sure it would have been painful, but it would have been something. And I've talked about this on the book, but there's that other level. And I tried to write about writing in the book, and my editor didn't want, she's like, that, take that out. Anything where you mention you're writing a book, just don't bother with that. And she was right. But talking to you guys, that extra layer adds to the experience in every way. And so as long as there was something for me to write about, it was always going to be a valuable experience, even if that meant getting humiliated. Like if he had, thrown me around and submitted me in 25 seconds, it just made me look like a fool, it would have been miserable, but it would have made for a great story, almost as good as knocking someone out. So.
Well, no, and one of the first articles I have them read is Gay Talese's The Loser, which, talk about one of the best essays, and it's about, a second massive loss that Patterson has against Sonny Liston.
I mean, Floyd Patterson is fascinating because his losses were so much more significant.
Yeah.
They felt so much more significant. He kind of turned losing into poetry. Yeah. And I think Gay Talese did a lot of that, where he wrote a lot about people who were on the losing end of things, just because everyone writes about winners. They write about winners all the time. It's a very American thing to write about winners. Gay Talese was smart, and he knew that there was a story to losing that we never got to see.
No, exactly. And just thinking about this makes me think about Self-Transcendent. What will it be like, everybody, when we're out of COVID, out of quarantine? I think we're going to have Self-Transcendent when we're able to hug the first time and, see family and do things. Like, I do think that I keep telling Josh, and I'm sure I've told you guys, the Whirring 2020s, I think, will be this time where we really value certain things that we weren't able to do in the same way. Now here, bringing in COVID, because that's what we kind of been doing a lot. Josh, what would it have been like if you didn't have a crowd, an audience with your fight? Do you think you would have reached that same level of?
No. And generally I don't like being in front of crowds, but I think because I don't like being in front of crowds, that made the experience all that more just sort of thrilling and discombobulating and full of meaning. No, I don't think it would have had nearly the same meaning, because I needed both to feel that fear of, because fear of getting beaten up is one thing. Fear of getting beaten up in front of lots and lots of people, that's where all my fear of fighting stemmed from. I don't think I was actually concerned about what it would be like to hurt in my face. I think it's the shame of being beaten up in front of people that always worried me. So that was there. And then also, yeah, I don't think when you do have a self-transcendent experience and suddenly you fall in love with everyone, you kind of want to fall in love with as many people as you possibly can. And if it were just me falling in love with the referee and the guy who was going to announce that I won the fight, that just wouldn't have the same overwhelming feeling to it. But looking out, like, people are cheering, and I've watched the videos from different angles, and a lot of people are cheering. They're like surprised that it happened. There's a lot of like, I did not have my money on that guy. But the fact that there were so many people around, most of whom I didn't know, it would have been a completely different experience. And I think it would have been hollower. It's the same way. I like playing music. I don't want to be in front of lots of people. It just doesn't interest me to be a performer. But I could totally see that walking on a stage in front of 10,000 people would just be something that you can't put into words, and that there's no substitute for it in daily experience. So I'm very glad I got to have that experience. I wouldn't want to do it again. I don't look forward to being shirtless in front of 800 strangers, but it was definitely an experience.
Oh no, it's so interesting. And to think about, I wonder, because we have talked about, we like to overthink everything in MMA, and you and I have talked about what it's changed with no audiences for boxing and the UFC. And we've mostly been talking about it from the perspective of the viewer, right? Do we notice anything different? Does it still feel like we're watching a fight? And a lot of my awesome snarky friends are like, I kind of like it better without, having to see the fans, it's my own show. But you're just now making me realize that this could have less effect just in general for the fighter in terms of achieving something without that direct, feedback. So
I'm sure it minimizes the experience for the fighter. I'm 100% sure. And I'm sure for them, it feels much more like a sparring match, and it feels like being in a gym. So I definitely feel bad for them. I happen to be one of your snarky friends who prefers the quiet. I like hearing the announcers, or not the announcers, but I like hearing the cornermen.
Yeah.
You can hear them breathing and if they're talking trash.
Yeah.
I don't like giant crowds of people, especially at fights. It doesn't generally tend to bring out the best in people. So I like that we've talked about this before in your class, that it feels a bit like watching some sort of weird theater production or something. And maybe it'll go away. Maybe I'll crave the crowds back, but for right now, I really enjoy it.
I know.
I like that it takes, now it takes them 7 seconds to walk down to the cage. It's not like a 5-minute process anymore.
I know. And we did go to a fight together in November of 2019.
Yeah.
Yes. The MFB belt? No, MF.
BMF.
And it's just so interesting that we all were in a place together. And I'm going to bring up Trump was there.
Trump was there, yeah.
Yes. You wrote about this in the Washington Post, because going back to the chapter, The Gathering Darkness, and you guys probably read this, that Josh had the dilemma of compartmentalizing his fight when the world was kind of, to you at that point, going crazy because Trump was he gathering steam, or he actually wins the election?
I think the time that I was writing about was right in the weeks before the election. I fought a couple weeks after the election, but the time I was writing about trying to concentrate on my training was in the weeks leading up to the election, when it seemed like it was going to be really, really close. Trying to concentrate on push-ups and punching techniques, and also writing a book when this stuff was happening, especially the book. I wrote that section. I wrote that whole chapter. I wasn't intending to write about that, and I wasn't intending to put that in the book, but I was paralyzed, and I couldn't write anything, and because nothing felt relevant. Like, I was like, why the hell am I writing a book about mixed martial arts when the world is about to collapse and fascism has finally arrived in the United States? It felt stupid to write about. And I just sat there, as many of us do, and was looking at my phone all day and looking at news sites. And finally my wife very wisely and probably out of frustration with me said, well, just write about that, write about how hard it is for you to write during this time. And maybe at the very least, it'll just get your wheels going again. So I wrote the Gathering Storm chapter very quickly, actually. It just sort of came pouring out of me because all those ideas were right there. And she was right. It got me writing again and it got me moving again. But then when I was thinking about, should this be in the book? And I went back and forth with my editor, should that chapter be in the book? Will it mean as much when the book finally comes out? You know, we weren't sure at the time. It seemed like he might've been, you know, he was going to be kicked out of office any day. We had no idea what Trump was going to mean to people when the book came out, or, you know, you want to write a book that means something to people 10 years down the line. We just didn't know. But it felt like, no, this was a huge part of me getting ready for this fight. This was all going on while my worst fear was coming true in the world. And so to deny that and pretend like I was learning to fight in a vacuum felt both dishonest and also silly. Like I didn't need to cut that. Like it exists in a time in the world. I like the idea that you can't take the story of my fight and plop it down in the 80s or the 90s or the 60s. It had to happen in 2016 when the world was eating itself alive.
Yeah. And so this is what I tweeted out. You know, this chapter is the Gathering Darkness. You did not know about 2020 at that point. And I'm curious, and then please, I want students to please bring in any questions. And then, oh, we have a dog.
Hey.
What did 2020 show us? Like, if you were to add another chapter, because I thought 2016 was bad as well, and just was very, just thinking about, it was definitely a course change. 2020, we have a pandemic, we have very divisive political parts dealing with the pandemic, and just in general. As this election came, we have, and I talked about this with like Angela Hill talked about how we could no longer be distracted from sports, especially in the early part where we saw and our social justice kind of, we really could not look away anymore and seeing the disparity there. And up to the election, which maybe finally is over as of today. I don't know. This is November 24th, and the transition has been allowed.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, Josh, knowing that you've gone through history and other aspects about why we fight, what does this year bring to light?
In relation to my book?
Or just why we fight, or why, what does it say about humans in general, the conflict that we've seen, the way we respond to these threats? I was going to do something really cute on Twitter saying we took a punch from a virus and then thought we were going to be had the 1-2 from we've got a comment too, from the political divide. So I'm just curious, like if you were writing this, just thoughts about 2020 as a writer.
It's a really interesting question and a tough question. The only thing I could say, what I was thinking about when you were asking the question was, if I were writing the book now, there would definitely be, I would have to address the issue of racial justice and the issue of race in this country in general, I think. And especially as issues of race and racial justice exist in terms of sports and American sports and what we expect from our athletes and what we don't expect from our athletes. And for me, in terms of what I would want to write about, that would be the most fascinating thing, because there are lots of people out there who are smarter or more well-equipped or more trained to write about the bigger, broader issues, why we fight in terms of why we fight politically and why we fight wars and why we fight science and why we fight masks and why we fight logic. That stuff is so beyond, I don't think I have the constitution to research that stuff, because I just want to blow people up when they fight science. Like I would be a bad writer. But I think that I am fascinated by and would be fascinated by issues of race and identity and politics as it relates to sports, particularly in America, where sports is such a commodity and where we expect athletes and human beings to act as commodities and not as human beings. Just the whole shut up and dribble phenomenon. I mean, that whole idea that, because athletes are there to entertain us and get paid lots of money, that they therefore abdicate their rights and their responsibilities to exist in the world and reflect on the world, just seems like the height of insanity to me. So I think that would absolutely have made for a chapter in my book.
Yeah. No, and it's interesting how MMA, like with the relationship with Dana White and Trump coming close, and seeing also the extremism, how it's filtered into MMA.
Yeah.
What, like your gym that you would go to in Brooklyn, would politics ever be brought up, or is it a safe space?
I don't remember ever talking about politics with people at the gym. And my gym, because it was my gyms were in Brooklyn and Manhattan, they're obviously places of, they're extremely multicultural places. Places, people of all different types and nationalities and races and genders and the whole thing. So I don't remember politics ever being an issue. And I have always sort of looked on the bright side of MMA and sort of seen MMA as being a bastion of multiculturalism by its very nature. I mean, for me, it's something I've written about several times. I wrote about several times for Fightland about, MMA in some ways is the most American thing in the world. It strikes me as being the same way jazz is the most American. I mean, you sort of take, there could be nothing more American than taking a bunch of different traditions from nationalities and countries from around the world and smashing them together, sucking out all of their like religious, cultural significance, taking away everything related to sort of its higher aspirations, smushing them together and coming up with this brand new thing. That's MMA in that regard is the height of like it's like a perfect summation of what America is. And when I'm waxing poetic and I'm feeling romantic about the United States and feeling romantic about MMA, that's how I view those two things together. The fact of the matter is, the gym that I used to go to in Brooklyn is run by Renzo Gracie, who is near as I can tell, a total fascist, and who loves Bolsonaro down in Brazil, has talked I don't know if he's worked for him, offered to work with him. I mean, like he's affiliated with terrible people. So, I'm not sure I would have wanted politics to come up at the MMA gym because, just like relationships at the MMA gym, it's like if you really want the gym to sort of function as a gym and be this respite in your life, probably best to keep romance and politics out of it. And also I would have despaired. I would have probably said, I can't come to this gym. And then I would have been like, where the hell do I go? So yeah, you're right. And you see it all over the place that MMA has some really dark affiliations, and that, dictators and autocrats and purveyors of, violent and pernicious masculinity use MMA all the time to promote their agendas. At the same time, I probably think that the majority of people in my experience that do MMA and go to MMA gyms are not that way at all. They just tend to not speak as much. Authoritarians and autocrats tend to be pretty loud, and we hear about it when an MMA fighter is a racist. You hear about that. I mean, I remember going to see fights once, Muay Thai fights in New York, and this gym came in from Pennsylvania, and word got around that one of the guys in the gym was a Nazi. And he was fighting on the card, and thankfully he lost. And but when someone is a Nazi, you hear about it. Like you're going to know the guy's a Nazi. The 999 other people who are there who are not Nazis, they don't get press attention for not being for being not Nazis.
Yeah.
Which is a rationalization, but at the same time, I think is true in that when we hear about these horrible things where MMA gyms are affiliated with white supremacy groups, or certain MMA fighters are pushing QAnon theories, I think the majority of fighters are not that way at all. And at least in my experience, it hasn't been that way at all. Again, my gyms are in New York City. So who knows what they're like in other places.
It's more than I know, because I had students from my class yesterday say, Professor Kidder, are you going to start fighting?
I've asked you that. You should be boxing.
Okay, after COVID.
There you go.
I'll bring you to it. So did anyone, I want to make sure, because what time is it? Oh, it's 5:06. 5:20 is the end of our class. So I really want to make sure we get everyone's, ideas. Actually, Josh, I
Yes.
know my class would love to hear your thoughts on procrastination and writing, because he's pro procrastination. But I think you're kind of telling people, it kind of demystifies writing. If you could kind of do that, and then let's open it up for all questions. And we're traveling.
Yes. I've got to move down here. Can you hear me?
Yeah. No, I like the background. Looks good.
Okay. Yeah. It looks like I'm going to do a stand-up comedy sketch set here.
You're lagging a little bit.
I'm what?
You're lagging. I don't know. Your reception isn't as good.
Oh.
If you could go back up.
Okay. This?
That's better.
Okay. Yeah. I've got my wife coming home soon, so I'm trying to find a place. It's a very small apartment.
I'm sorry. All right, you're in the stairwell, and it's great.
I'm in the stairwell.
Tell us about your method as it relates to embracing procrastination. Is that maybe? Or
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I resigning myself to procrastination. Yeah, I think. I mean, I was thinking about this the other day. Is that I need to, now that the election is over and I don't need to be staring at my phone all the time and worrying about going on news sites all the time. I need to put my phone away and put my computer away in order I need to get back into a writing mindset. And what I've been realizing recently is that because we are in a constant state we have all these technological tools that make it possible for us to distract ourselves from boredom and procrastination and despair. Boredom and procrastination and despair, that's kind of where the brain starts to work. I mean, that's kind of when the brain has to start taking care of itself and go searching for answers and go searching for something new. And when I'm starting to write something and I get a little blocked, or I don't have any ideas, or I'm getting a little bored, and I can just literally on the same machine that I'm writing, go and then search the internet for something. It's like I'm not giving my brain a chance to go play around and just sort of suffer and try and get somewhere new. So I think that having access to my phone and having access to the computer all the time it's really damaging to my ability to write. So when I think about procrastination, I think about it's not about searching for distractions. It really is about staring at the wall. I mean, it really is about accepting that an enormous part of writing is not writing. It's dying, waiting for something to come into your brain. And if you go running off searching for distraction and entertainment in the face of that boredom, you won't ever get anywhere new or interesting. The problem, of course, is that the very machine that allows us to write is the machine that provides us distraction from writing. So part of me feels like I want to buy a computer that only has a word processor on it, just so I can't go searching on the Washington Post or YouTube every time words don't come to me. So yeah, I'm all for procrastination as long as we do it right. You got to do procrastination right.
Yeah. And also, I think you said that knowing that a deadline, sometimes it's not just you're being lazy and waiting to the end. There's something that you say that it causes the brain to churn and allows the words to come because of the necessity.
Yeah. Again, I think that there is a sense of, I think that your brain and your body will find a way. It's like you're falling off a cliff and you're, tumbling down and you're going into a ravine where you're going to die. You'll reach involuntarily for anything that you can grab onto. And I think that if you put yourself in a position where you have to fall off a cliff sometimes, where sometimes it's going to be awful and you don't know what you're writing about, but you just sort of let yourself go and let yourself live in that. I think the brain has a funny way of finding something to grab onto. And I know for myself, there's always been the times when I've found something new and found something interesting is in those desperate moments when there's nothing happening and there's nothing coming.
Yeah.
It's not good to feel comfortable all the time. It's not good to feel like you know what you're doing. This is why I don't outline. I don't structure things beforehand. I don't generally have an idea of what I'm going to do next because I need to feel like I'm in a position where, for me, the writing happens as it's happening. I don't feel like I know what I'm writing about until I'm writing about it. And the only way to put yourself in a position where you're writing about something is to start writing. I remember reading once that Philip Roth, who was always one of my favorite authors, he would start writing and he would write sometimes hundreds of pages of stuff. And then he would finally write a sentence he loved. And then that would be the first sentence of his new book. And everything he had written up until that point, he would throw away. And that kind of sense of not being married to anything, but putting yourself in the process that's what I like about writing. Because writing in that way is close to fighting. I mean, it feels dangerous. It feels perilous. And things don't feel perilous if you're constantly giving yourself a way to distract yourself.
I agree in terms of certain things about, like I have my students, I kind of trick them into starting their paper in that I have like an annotated bibliography that they have to write or proposal. And I'm like, those are due at this point. But then I'm like, by the way, you just started your paper. And, I think that sometimes we have to trick our brain so that you're not to be in that position. Because I think there's nothing worse for a writer than the blank page or lots of time. If an editor says, take your time with that draft, I don't need it. It won't get done, unless.
I absolutely need deadlines.
Yeah.
I'm no good without deadlines.
Yeah. And that, I think it's just because our brains are always trying to make meaning out of chaos, I feel. And as writers, we try and actually put that into words. I think that we need to kind of, time is a structure that we can make that meaning making. Is that something you could say?
Sure.
Into like a place where it can actually be contained. So you guys know I do a lot of those things where I have you do a pre-writing exercise and stuff like that. That's my strategy. I also think if we want to go into your chapter, or it's just a thing, you said you were inspired by Joan Didion when you were using your interaction with the doctor about framing your piece, because I think that's also something that students aren't told enough about using a framework and it's not stealing, it's not anything, it's an inspiration. Can you tell us about your being inspired by Didion? Sure.
I will say that there's a great quote by the filmmaker Jim Jarmusch where he said that originality means nothing, authenticity means everything. And I always love that quote, the idea that you're stealing from someone. I don't think we should feel ashamed to steal from someone. If you're stealing only from one person, then you're going to have a problem. That's when you have people that are just rip-off artists. But I mean, I think your style as a writer is just you have a very particular original group of people you steal from wholeheartedly, and then you stick them together and you get your own voice. So I actually, as I have gone on, and I find it more and more difficult to read nonfiction, because as a nonfiction writer, I find that I'm very vampiric in my approach to reading now. Like I'll literally just be like, oh, I got it. I know what I need to take from you, Joan Didion, and I steal it from her, and that's that. which is not a great way to read, which is why I love reading fiction, because I don't generally steal from fiction writers.
Trying to overanalyze and yeah.
Yeah, but now if someone says, "Oh, you got to read this writer," and I sit down and I go, "Boom, I got what I need from you," and just take out its beating heart, and it's terrible, and it's like not romantic or artistic at all.
I think it's a good way to think about writing, is that it, you know, because I think we're very scared to do something like that, because I think they've been drilled in, it's plagiarism, you can't take that, but it's very different when you're using, like yourself. I told my students to use the idea of blocking off sections where you have a narrative, and then bring in biology that also connects, and you can't have them disjointed, but they can propel the narrative. So we're using your structure for them to learn of a different way.
Right. And I stole that in some ways from a lot of different writers. I mean, you know, I had to be introduced to, I mean, I have my own way of doing it, but I had to be introduced to writers who were working in that fragmentary way, or working in a discursive way, or working in a sort of, I'm going to forget the word for it, collage kind of a way. Like there's a genre of writers out there that I have just, you know, again, like I saw the writers like that and I was like, that's what I want to do. But it couldn't be exactly like what he did or exactly what she did. That's plagiarism, that's thievery, the whole thing. But yeah, you're absolutely right. And writing in the style of someone else, the first few years that I was writing for the Austin Chronicle, when I was writing film reviews, it was absolutely like, I would be like, oh, here, I'm in my Norman Mailer phase, or I would write film reviews that sound exactly like Anthony Lane's film reviews for the New Yorker. Like, you have to do that as a young writer. Like, you have to go through a period where you're writing exactly like someone else. Because eventually you just stuff all that stuff together. And, you know, I think we romanticize things that you got to find your voice, and what's your voice, and are you being true to yourself? And, you know, are you speaking with your voice? It's like that stuff has to be stumbled blindly into. Yeah. And the only way you stumble blindly into it is by talking like someone else, and then someone else, and then someone else. And then one day you wake up and you're kind of starting to talk like yourself a little bit. It's not very romantic. It's very practical. It's great when it starts to happen, when you start recognizing your own voice, but the process itself is not very romantic.
Yeah, no, I couldn't say it better. Well, we have 2 more minutes, and I want to make sure we have any questions, you know, Alex, Lauren, Lynn, I don't know if Maggie's still there. Do you have any? I know, Lauren, you have some writing inspirations, or aspirations, I should say. Do you have any questions?
Gosh, I have so many, I don't know what one to go with first. I guess the first thing would be how you kind of got into the industry, because I'm a recent journalism major. I was heavy science and everything, and then I completely switched to journalism because I love writing so much. So I guess my first question would just be how you, where to even start, basically.
Yeah, that's a good question. I was living in Austin, Texas, and I was 28 years old, and I had no idea what I wanted to do with myself. I just no direction at all. And I needed to find work. I just needed to find something to do with some of my hours in my day. And I think for a long time, again, we were talking about romantic notions. For a long time, I had thought, I need to find my thing. I need to find out what my great thing is. And I thought I could step from step A to step Z. But finally, it just became clear I just need to find something to fill some hours in my day. And I was raised in a house of grammar nerds. My mother and my father and my older sister, they all just, we're just proofreading types, grammar types. So I said, well, I know I like doing that and I can do that. So maybe I'll try to find a job doing some proofreading. And I stumbled into a unpaid proofreading internship at the Austin Chronicle. So I was, 28 years old and not getting paid. Literally, I sat next to the women's bathroom and made sure they had this thing called flats, where they would lay out each individual page of the 120 pages of every weekly issue. And it was my job to go through each page. And if it said continued on page 76, I would walk to page 76 and make sure it continued on that page. And it was humbling, but immediately it was just I felt like I was with my people. I was just around a bunch of people who loved words, and there were writers everywhere. And I was hanging out with people who were corrected writers. And that's how I got in. And then the job opened up in the proofreading department, and I did that, and then I started writing for them. And eventually I got fired from being a proofreader because I was much more interested in being a writer. But it really was just about, I took the unpaid gig in the environment just to make sure that that's where I wanted to be. And that's the problem with going from step A to step Z, is you don't realize that you have to, like, you never know after you take step A to B where that could lead. I never would have thought that I would be writing about mixed martial arts 10 years ago when I was taking an unpaid internship outside a women's bathroom, making sure that things were continued on page, whatever. But it was just a matter of putting myself in an environment that felt at all like what I should be doing. What kind of writing are you interested in, like daily news stuff or investigative stuff? What essays? What are you thinking?
Well, my big goal, I'm super into fiction writing, but obviously I know I can't just really, like, my parents were really worried. I'm like, I know I can't walk into somewhere and be like, I'm going to write a fiction book. It's going to be a bestseller, whatever. But I do have a very heavy science background, so I think that could help me. And I am interested in writing like science type articles and trying to explain stuff to people. I'm also interested in investigative journalism. I think that's super cool. I wanted to be a detective when I was younger, so I think that's also a really neat job to have.
I have so much respect for investigative journalists. I tried it a couple times and I just realized I don't have the disposition for it. And I wrote terrible pieces that probably were on the verge of being libelous. So I was like, I should probably not be doing this anymore because I can get myself in trouble. But the people I know, like I have a friend who worked for the Texas Observer for years, and he was a great investigative journalist. And this guy, like, his stories like got people off of death row. It was like, this is just insane that you can do this with words. And I'm so glad that people do that. I just don't have the disposition for it. But if you do, that's awesome, because the one thing the world needs from writers, it's investigative journalists.
And Josh, this makes me so sad to hear people when they say, I love fiction, but like my parents tell me I can't do it.
Yeah.
Or, because God bless, that's what we frame our culture on. Are people who write fiction, whether it's for novels or TV and everything. And it's, for me, that's the ultimate kind of trying to capture what is human. Even I know fiction, but it's that's what it really involves. So Josh, do you have friends who write fiction, or do you have any advice on that accord?
On writing fiction?
Yeah.
I don't know if I have any friends who are fiction writers. I will say this, though, that having grown, I played music when I was younger, and that's what I wanted to do. And I heard the same, like my parents or grandparents said the same thing Lauren's parents said. It's the old, it's a great avocation, but you need a vocation speech. I will say this, that I think it's probably a parent's job to tell you that, and it's probably our jobs to tell our parents to go fuck themselves. So I think that dynamic isn't the worst thing in the world. Like if the carpet were rolled out for us as creative people, then it wouldn't mean as much, and also people probably wouldn't be as good at it. I think probably the best fiction writers, the ones who struggled the most, like had the most obstacles they had to overcome to get there, whether it was not having money or parents who told them they couldn't do it, or whatever the strictures of the society were, whether they're racial or gender strictures. Like good art comes out of struggle. So I think that wishing away obstacles is probably not the right way to do it. It's more accepting that obstacles are just, that's what the world is designed to do. The world is designed to put up obstacles in the way of people who have anything interesting to say or believe. That's just what the world does. Wishing that away won't help. Instead, saying, the obstacles are valuable because they're going to make me better. As for writing fiction, I can only say that I tried it once and I don't know how people do it. I don't have that in me. All I read is fiction. I mean, I'm reading a great fiction book right now. Like I love fiction more than anything. Every time I write a sentence about something that didn't happen in the world, it feels ridiculous. And it's just me. I'm just not, I don't conjure things out of nothing the way some people can. Some people can write about things that never happened and it feels like these people exist. Everything happened. I marvel at that ability. I don't have it. And also I don't it's amazing to me that people can motivate to do it, because just like Lauren was, or you were talking about with the deadlines, the reason I was able to get my book written is because someone gave me a book contract beforehand and said, okay, you could take the next year off and write this book, but we need the book in a year. Fiction writers, they write a whole book and then try to sell the book. I wouldn't get it done. I wouldn't have the motivation to do it every day without deadlines, or really it's the sort of the moral panic of having been paid for something and then not turning something in. So there's so many things about fiction writing that I don't understand, but that I think that makes it, that leaves me in a position where I get to enjoy fiction. Like I can read fiction and really enjoy it and not worry about how it's connected to me at all.
No, and yeah, no, I agree. And yes, it is something that it's hard work, but there are different levels to it. You can start by getting short stories, you know, submitted and published in literary journals, other aspects, and build up there, you know, and there are always, for me, it's also cohorts, finding your community of people, mentors as well. I'm trying to get Lauren hooked up with some friends of mine, but it's a different, it's almost, we have to view it as like an apprenticeship, because it doesn't have the parent approved, you can go to this school and this, take this CPA exam or whatever, and you can and end up here. There isn't a direct line, but the payoff is really cool that you've created.
I can't even imagine what that's like to create a novel that works. To create a world and have it work I mean, I can't even imagine what kind of thrill that would be. Because writing about a world that did exist was a thrill for me, but to create one from scratch, I can't even imagine how thrilling that must be. But like commenting on what you were just saying, that might be, I never thought about it, but it might be a reason why I don't really connect with the fiction writing thing, is because I don't do well with mentors. I don't do well with communities. I see writing as a very, very solitary thing. And I'm very reluctant to believe that some writer knows more about things than I do, even though I realize it's a stupid way to approach the world. It just doesn't, again, it's just dispositions, right? There's no right way to do things or wrong way to do things. You know, I love that, you know, like writers, they love to, you know, we like to read interviews with other writers and think, oh, do you write first thing in the morning? And oh, I don't do anything. I don't even have a I don't even have a piece of toast until I've written 500 words. And we look to those things as for guidance and for proof or for ways to work in the world. And all those things are just indications that every person does it completely differently. Like I have no interesting thoughts first thing in the morning, and definitely not before I eat breakfast. So the idea that I would get 500 words done before breakfast is insane. Like no matter what Dostoevsky says, it's insane to me that you would ever do that. But all those kinds of interviews and conversations have ever taught me was that there's just every single person has their own particular way of doing things.
And this kind of brings back, you do have a great section in your book where you talk about the kind of comparison of writers and fighters, because I do believe it's a unique position of, there's this isolation. AJ Liebling, it's on my website, a writer like a boxer stands alone.
Yeah.
Yet, and you say that you were never someone who liked mentors or anything. What about Dorius and, you know, your coaches? There's an element, your editor. And I think that you do bring people into your isolation. So it's an interesting at times. But
fighting is the one area of my life I can remember ever being perfectly comfortable having coaches and teachers and guides, and giving myself up completely to the idea that I knew nothing. Because there was a whole world of knowledge there that before I started watching MMA, I didn't even know was knowledge. I didn't even think about fighting as something that could be learned. I thought it was something that tough people were born with the ability to do. So I was and remain perfectly happy to put aside my notions of expertise and the way the world should be for the sake of fighting. Not only because it was kind of a new experience for me, and a really pleasant experience, but also because those people are going to save me from getting murdered. It just, when it comes to writing, it's just, I feel like I've been writing in English since I was 7 years old. I mean, like, I've always been passionate about words and interested in words, and always had a mind that wanted to explore new things. So in that regard, I'm reluctant to defer to anyone, but my lack of knowledge about fighting was so complete, that I was happy to defer to people who had been doing it for their entire lives. And someone like Darius, or some of these other people who had, like Darius literally has been boxing since he's 15, he's probably 60 now. It's like that wealth of knowledge. But you're right. Like, if I met a 60-year-old writer who'd been writing since he was 15, I would never sit down with that writer and, probe their brain. It would never cross my mind. But a boxer, I could happily listen to a boxer tell me what I'm doing wrong with my left foot for hours.
No, it is. Well, I just find it's an interesting thing being a writer, because I think I'm a fairly social person, maybe an extrovert, but there are times though when I write, I have to, like, everyone needs to be out of my world, and I go into that space. And that's why I think it's an interesting thing, that, just like fighting, you can have all the training, but you are on your own. And, and I think it's, again, these things are very hard things to do. Combat sports, it's not for everyone, thank God. But the people who do it are just, are phenomenal often. And for writers, it's not easy to do, I'm sorry to say, because you're having to make meaning and put it on word and be judged. But it's also freaking phenomenal. So,
for me, it's like anything else. It's like, the things that are hard and that are off the beaten path and that are not things that the majority of people do. They require a lot more effort, and you put yourself at a lot more risk, but I think the payoff is greater. I mean, again, it's a matter of disposition. I just don't have it in me to be an accountant. I don't have it in me to work an office job. If someone does, it's totally fine. But it just always struck me as even failing while attempting something interesting just always struck me as much better than succeeding at something where the path was laid out for you, which again is why if I had gotten knocked out by John Potts or strangled half to death by John Potts, it still would have been cool.
Yeah, I love that. It's okay to fail, especially if you're
I hope so anyway.
Anyone else have? I know we're going after class, but this is really, thank you, Josh, for
it's my pleasure
coming to our class and answering these questions and giving us these discussions. Does anyone?
I love writing and fighting. Are you kidding me?
Thank you. Writing and fighting feels the same way. Alex, do you have anything you want to bring to Josh?
Not exactly, but I enjoyed the sharing and how Josh actually walked through when he was writing this book. So yeah.
Thanks, man. And if you're okay with it, I mean, if you're comfortable with my reading your story, I'd love to read that story that you wrote, the fiction story you wrote about the.
Oh, for sure. Oh, for sure.
Fighting.
Yeah, I think Professor. Yeah, Professor can share that with you. Yeah.
Yeah, if you could send that to me, Nancy.
Yeah. No, I'd love to. Yes, thank you, Josh.
Ooh.
And then Maggie, do you have any questions for Josh? Or is she frozen?
Yeah, honestly, yeah, I might.
Maggie,
she's just enjoying
the sunshine in San Diego and hanging out with the dog and.
Yeah, no, there's so many animals here. It's I'm just living my life. Yeah. Oh my God, wait, and I'm sorry, I have to show you one of the cats real fast. I'm so sorry.
How many animals do we have?
Okay, so a little. Okay, ready? Hi, Apollo. This is Apollo.
Oh my God.
Is it Apollo? Oh wait, we're cut off from sound. Oh my gosh, there's two of them.
There's two of them.
We might have a fight. I don't know. This is where
Now things are happening.
now things are happening.
Oh my god. Okay, yeah. So there we have two puppies.
What are their names?
Okay. Ooh, on the floor right now. This is Mars. No, baby. Mars is over there. Oh my god. But yeah.
I love it.
Okay.
2020.
But yeah.
It's all gone insane.
No.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. We were.
So this-
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Oh my god, I'm so sorry. But yeah. Okay. But some questions. I apologize. So much commotion.
No problem.
But yeah. Okay. But yeah. So I thought it was really interesting when you were kind of talking about like the transcendence and kind of the spirituality like within like fighting. Like okay. So like. I feel like what I kind of want to ask was just like in general, like, do you think among fighters, do you think that like fighters thrive off of like winning like more or losing more in like the spiritual kind of sense and like just like the kind of like self-actualization kind of sense?
I don't think, especially professionals, I don't think they find any meaning at all in losing the way I did. That was a luxury that I could feel or potentially feel. As someone who's just seeking an experience. But I think that fighters who lose, I think it's like dying for them. I mean, I just think that they work so hard and for so long that when they do lose, it's like any other sport. Like, you know, it always frustrates me when you hear people say that professional athletes, professional basketball players don't care about winning and losing because they make millions of dollars either way. In order to become a professional basketball player, like beyond your skill and your athletic ability, you have to hate losing so much that you would rather die. And I think that fighters are just like that, except they have the added feeling that if someone beats them in a fight, they would have died if there wasn't a referee there, which is a real shot at their egos. So I don't think, I might be wrong. I don't think with a lot of professional MMA fighters, there's any spiritual element to losing at all. It's just when they lose, it's just they have to suffer probably for weeks, maybe even months. It's just misery that I probably couldn't even imagine. I just happened to be in a lucky position when you're not, you know, when you're not committed to something, when you don't throw yourself into something with your whole heart, you can skirt on top of it, right? It's like being in a relationship where you're not really all the way in. If they break up with you, you don't really care that much. If you're all the way in and you lose the fight, like you're leveled. I wasn't all the way in. Like I was taking from fighting what I needed, like an experience here, a thrill there, a topic for a book, and I took what I could get.
Yeah. Yeah, cool. And also just like another question, just honestly just curious, do you know anything about like Taoism or anything like that? Are you into that?
I definitely read a lot about Taoism when I was in college. Yeah.
The way you talk about like fighting and just like kind of interaction that you have like with the spirituality, like, just like within the interaction, just like within yourself, sounds like a lot of like some like Taoist kind of teachings and like kind of concepts, which is like I thought that was very cool.
It's great to hear, because I think that was probably the first religion. I mean, I was born Jewish, so I had some experience with that, but I think Taoism was the first religion that I think I ever sought out, because I remember freshman year in college, I took some religion classes, and I think that one connected with me most. So I wouldn't doubt that it's back there in my brain somewhere, that's sort of in my bloodstream after all these years. So yeah, I appreciate your saying that.
Yeah, no, of course. And then also just like one more thing, are you into poetry? Is that something? Because yeah, we were just talking about like the fiction and kind of like nonfiction kind of like dynamic, and I just thought it was like interesting because I think that like for a lot of people who don't like I guess like who don't really like who can't really invest themselves like in like fiction, like that kind of like abstract kind of just like art and like writing. I feel like poetry is like a very good like alternative to that, because it kind of sounds like the reader, but in the most like kind of like majestic but like still surreal way.
Right.
And,
I like poetry. I love reading some poetry. I don't think I've ever tried writing poetry. Maybe I should try that. It's a good idea, because really it is. It's the weakness I have with fiction is I'm just not a good storyteller. So if I could just write about what a tree looks like, that I think I could do. I think I have just some descriptive ability. Maybe I'll aim in that direction.
Yeah,
Yeah.
nice. Yeah.
I appreciate the idea.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you
Matt,
have
do you write
any-
poetry?
Yeah, I actually, yeah, I've been trying to get into more poetry now because I feel like I just want like a more like intimate kind of like reading. Because I feel like just like getting into college and all that, it was just like it was just a lot that was just like not personal and like intimate enough for me. And it wasn't. I feel like it just like really some things are just really not worth my time. I feel like. But yeah, but so I've been trying to get into more poetry just because, yeah, it just be a very like intimate kind of thing, and it like centers me as like the reader, and I like that very much in reading.
Who do you like?
I think one of my favorite, Emma, who's here, she actually showed me Octavio Paz.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Octavio Paz is definitely like a new poet that I really like.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Okay, I'm gonna try out some poetry.
Yeah, I hope, yeah, cool.
I love
Yeah.
that you say it's more personal for me, actually, in terms of I enjoy reading it. Like Jackie Woodson has some great poetry, kind of more in the YA realm. It scares the hell out of me because of how precise
Mm.
it is. And I think I need a little bit more cushion of words. But for people who do it, I think I've been told by poets that they think the opposite, that they would rather kind of be more succinct, and for them it's more natural to have less is more, where I for me, I'm just like, is that the perfect word in the scheme?
You like more is more.
Yeah, more is more.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, whenever I write, I have to I cut about 50% before I actually, like, at least before, because I go out and then that's how I write. But
Oh yeah, you spit it all out there. The
Yeah.
editing process is so much more pleasant than the writing process.
yeah. Great questions. Zayoung, did you have any questions, or Lynn? 'Cause I don't know. Hi, Lynn.
I don't have question. Just I'm going to cite Josh as example in my assignment 3, as the topic is age is not a barrier, and I know you start fighting since 33 years old, and your first match is 40, so it's not too late to start fighting. Not We don't have to start fighting at 20. It's just like a hobby. You can start whenever you want. And another example of the age topic is Archie Moore.
Definitely. That's great.
I agree.
Thank you. I'm young at heart. That's what I go for. Young at heart.
I love it, Josh. You're building up your citations here.
I know. I like this.
I know, I know, and I agree. Speaking of age, I've been trying not to follow this, but is Mike Tyson fighting this weekend?
Yes.
He is.
And he's fighting Roy Jones Jr.
Roy Jones Jr. And
But they're writing. Here's the weird thing. It's like a glorified sparring match.
Oh, you can.
And I don't know how they're going to do this, but they're saying you're not allowed to knock the other person out. I don't know how you stop that from happening. But yeah, it's glorified sparring rules.
Trying to think of the equivalent. It's like giving someone in target practice saying, don't try and hit the target.
Right. But this one is actually, it's hit the target, but don't have it go through the piece of paper.
Yes.
I don't even know. Like, you can hit these guys as hard as you can, but if they get knocked out, you lose. It doesn't make any sense at all.
Oh my Lord. Oh my
Yeah.
Lord. And he's 57, I believe.
It's got to be, yeah. Roy Joe Jr. I imagine Roy Jones is probably early 50s.
Wow. No, and like what, as Lynn said, and as you show exemplified, though, I think about George Foreman coming back.
Foreman.
And looking good. And, it is interesting. I also think there's something about how much damage you take early on.
Yeah.
Foreman, he got out. I mean, he took some rough fights in the 70s, but then took time off. And,
Yeah.
it's interesting to see how that goes, but
It's a disease fighting. It's both for money reasons and just as I was talking about before, like the thrill, the addiction to the thrill. It's hard to say no. It's hard to get away. I mean, I'm 44 now. I can't imagine stopping.
I know. And this is the thing, you can have a fight, like I'm thinking Foreman, who did he win the title from in the 90s? Was it Spanx or?
Michael Moore, maybe, or I don't know,
Yeah,
one of those guys who had it for like one fight.
amazing fight. And, you know, it was a new act for Foreman, right? He had his grill and he was smiley and so where he had kind of played the cool guy and was more, you know, stoic and didn't talk. He was now so affable. You can have that, or you can have Tito Ortiz versus Chuck Liddell 3.
Mm.
Was just sad to watch. And
I mean, yeah, then you get those fights where it should probably be a crime to promote them.
yes. I think Bellator put Shamrock back with oh gosh, Shamrock versus Gracie.
Yeah.
And yes, and I think it was so sad. It was just low blows the whole time, and they both were found to have PEDs. So it was just this is not what we want. But I'm gonna hope we're on the former, the George Foreman aspect with
Yeah.
or at least it's just, you know, because I enjoy Tyson's third act, because it's not the typical fighter, you know, where the third time you look at Joe Louis, you look at so many people who did not.
Well, the weird thing about Mike Tyson is that he really blossomed into self-awareness as a human being in the last 10 years. It's strange to me that his self-awareness extends to every part of his life except the recognition that he should not be fighting anymore. In every other way, he's become a really fascinating guy.
Yeah.
And then he's got the same blind spot every damn fighter has.
Yes, you know, you know, maybe we should end there. That fighting, it does that euphoria that you talked about, that self-transcendent is so captivating, and you're chasing that dragon. That we have this upcoming fight, but hopefully there's no knockouts. So
apparently there can't be.
I know. Well, thank you again, Josh.
Yeah, thank to all of you guys for checking in and for talking to me.
I know this has been a rough semester, but I love that we ended with you. Although we're going to have conferences when we get back from break, and I'll be in touch. Josh, I can give them maybe your contact information if they
Please, of course.
have any questions down the line.
Yeah, you could give my email. Absolutely.
Yes, anyone who wants him to read your story, you know, or anything.
Yeah, I mean, if any of you guys are writing anything and you just want some feedback, or if you ever want to talk about, Lauren, you had asked about ideas for, you know, starting your career and stuff. If you ever want to bang ideas around with me, I'm always more than happy to talk.
All right. I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. I love the writing and fighting community is great. And I appreciate how much you've helped my students learn. And, you know, often people come here and they're like, I wish I had this class when I went to school. But Josh, you and I kind of always saw how amazing literature in this space is. And so for us, it's just like, yeah, you know, there's amazing material that's been written about this.
Yeah. Some of the best writing ever has been done about fighting.
Yeah. Including this, which you guys already have a copy, but everyone else, available hardback and paperback.
Available in paperback, yeah.
Great thing to do. Like, don't have big parties for this holiday season, but just sit home and read Why We Fight.
We should all be sitting at home and reading and not seeing people. Reading Why We Fight is you're doing society good.
You are. You
Yeah.
are, definitely. Well, thank you, Josh. I'll be in touch. Everyone else, have a great break. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, I'll see you soon.
Okay.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.